My name is Trudy Rondeau, and I'm the chair of the BC First Responders Mental Health Committee. I'm pleased today to be having a conversation with a first responder couple intended to benefit your family night session. This video can also be watched on its own to help viewers improve their understanding of first responder mental health issues and concerns. We're privileged today to be recording this conversation on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded or treaty territory of the Coast Salish people, including the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Tsawwassen Nation. I would also like to recognize that some of you may be watching today from other regions of the province or country and acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of those lands. Before we get started, what is family? In this context, family is broadly defined to encompass all those who love and support a first responder. And it's important to remember and consider that there are at least two parts of the family dynamic. One, how the family members can support the first responder, and two, how the family needs to be supported. The goal of today's interview is to create a resource addressing both how to support a first responder and how to support the family of the first responder. Today's discussion may include topics some members could find upsetting or triggering. If so, please take care of yourself, reach out for any support you may need, and remember you can always come back later if you want to revisit the recording. Audience members by the end of this interview will describe how first responders' mental health challenges can have a mental health impact on the family and be able to describe some of the ways in which a family member can support a first responder loved one and maintain their own resilience. Today, I'm happy to introduce Stephanie and Jordan McWilliams. Jordan's from the Delta Police Department and currently works with the Integrated Emergency Response Team. Stephanie is from the Vancouver Police Department, currently working with the RCMP's Federal and Serious Organized Crime Unit. They met 13 years ago while in the hiring process for their respective police departments. Fast forward to 10 years of marriage, 2 daughters, a dog, and learning to overcome significant personal and professional adversity, Stephanie and Jordan will discuss their experiences with mental health resiliency. From a high-profile police-involved shooting to a life-threatening medical crisis, the couple has endured a number of professional and personal incidents that compounded their stress. Through it all, they learned new strategies for overcoming these stressors to maintain a healthy, meaningful relationship with each other and their children. So welcome to you both. Let's just dive right in and start talking about mental health. As first responders, how do you support each other's mental health? Stephanie, let's start with you.
So I think that Jordan and I are in a really lucky situation in some ways, with both being police officers. We understand each other's jobs, and there's like an extra layer of understanding of what we might be going through. We've definitely, had our ups and downs with our mental health individually, and a lot of the times at different times. So we've both had the opportunity to support each other when we've been going through those difficult mental health situations.
Okay, Jordan, what does that support actually look like?
I think a big part of supporting your partner, and like Stephanie said, both each other in our jobs, maybe a little bit more, but that doesn't exclude partners who aren't first responders. They can be supportive too. And a big part of that, I think, is just being open to talking about how you're feeling and asking your partner. I think the person who knows you the best is often your partner. And when you know each other really well, you can see things perhaps in each other before you'll even recognize them yourself. And just watching for those things, being prepared to talk about them is really helpful to make sure you're both healthy and being able to support each other.
That's great. Jordan, what are some of the changes that you've seen in Stephanie's mental health over your time together?
When she was having a hard time, she would get more closed off and, still be a loving partner and mom, but wasn't the same. And I noticed that kind of building over time until we both recognized that she was struggling with her mental health and was able to get some support. But I think I saw that in her before she even saw it in herself. When you get that support though, and you recognize that's what is going on in your life, you're able to just get back to normal and to be yourself again.
Stephanie, would you say that was correct? Jordan started seeing things in you before you started to see them yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. And because sometimes things happen really slowly over time, you don't necessarily, either of you might not see it, but there's times when I see where Jordan had kind of gone to, how he had changed, and just little uh, suggestions of what I was seeing was able to help him see it as well. I don't know if that's too general.
Okay. No, that's good. So, Stephanie, so how have you managed your own mental health? Jordan's mentioned that you've had some challenging times. How have you managed it?
My first choice is I always go to physical fitness. I try to just work out every day to get my mind in a positive mindset. When I haven't seen that working, I've reached out to, normally like talking to somebody is just a great way to help you figure out what you're dealing with and talk it out. But I had to make a difficult decision at one point to go to my department and actually say out loud that I was struggling, and it was a really difficult hurdle to make. Um, but once I made that hurdle, I found it was a relief. It was like one less thing to have to shoulder on my own. And there was a lot of support out there, like going to the peer support team and going to see a psychologist. And I also had the opportunity to do a retreat through my work as well.
Wow, and I think that's a very brave thing to do, because I think that the self-stigma sometimes prevents us from going forward and speaking out. And it must have been very challenging for you to speak out to your department and actually put a name to what was happening.
Yeah, honestly, like it was me kind of weighing out, am I going to be committing career suicide basically when I come out and say that I'm struggling? And I think there's also this like extra pressure as a female to hold this strong image, and you feel like you're defeating yourself as a female in the profession as well when you do that.
That's really interesting, career suicide. I would expect a lot of people think that it may be career suicide. Jordan, is it career suicide to step up and say something?
No, absolutely not. But like Steph, and you've already mentioned a couple of things that are really important, and it's that internalized stigma about what we think people are going to think of us if we come forward and say we have a stress injury or something like that. And um, we talked about this before a little bit, but a really good analogy is if you have a broken leg, you're going to go to the doctor or to the hospital and get it splinted and fixed and healed, and then you get to come back and be fully functional and keep working on in your career. And stress injuries are just like that. If you have mental health challenges, you just go and get the support you need, get supported, and then you can move forward. Like both of us have had our struggles with our mental health along our career, and I think it's quite common with first responders, and it has not in any way negatively impacted our career to come forward and just be honest about needing some support.
That's great. That's great to hear. Stephanie, when we spoke the other day, you talked about, I don't know if it was a friend or a colleague that you were able to share, and turns out that you were able to share your experiences with her, and that sort of normalized things for you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I had a great opportunity just to be working with somebody else that was having a physical injury, but was also having mental health issues because of that. And we were able to just discuss how we were feeling and learn. I learned that there was a lot of other people also dealing with mental health issues for different reasons, and you don't learn that unless you speak out about it, right? And it definitely normalized my the mental health situation that I was going through, that there are a lot of people that are dealing with it, and it made it a lot easier on yourself when you realize that there's so many other people that are having that issue at the same time.
Jordan, how do you think your work has impacted your relationships with family?
Well, in lots of ways, just like kind of globally, I think being in first responder profession, it does impact your outlook on life. I think for for many of us, we only interact with people on either the worst day of their life or rarely is it a positive time when the police are interacting with somebody. And because of that, you have to really compartmentalize the fact that that isn't normal reality. And just remember all the positives and try not to go down the road of every day being negative. So for me, one of the things that I've tried to do is just have a bit of a ritual to disconnect my day at work from my personal life. So whether that's at the end of my shift, just even going for a walk outside and breathing fresh air, or having a hot shower, and then I'm ready to be dad and husband again, not officer. I find that's very helpful to just make sure they're separate, because you don't want your work life just to constantly bleed into your personal life.
That's great. And we've heard a lot of research coming out now about the importance of getting out in nature, that walk, helping to disconnect you from your day and reset you into your family life. Stephanie, how about for you? How do you think your work has impacted your relationships with family?
So yeah, with having two young daughters, we, as they've gone older and we're sitting at the dinner table, or Jordan and I are discussing our days, we have to be a lot more cognizant of how much detail we're getting into, and that they're not thinking that the world is an awful place and that there's a lot of negative stuff going on around them.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting challenge, as both being first responders, and not only first responders, both being police officers. It must be challenging sometimes to sort of be able to share your day without being able to share so much detail that you're kind of impacting their mental health as well. Yeah. Okay. Stephanie, what first responder mental health resources would you recommend to family members?
Early in our careers, the JI used to hand out a book called Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement Officers. If you can get your hands on that book, it was very enlightening on where people might end up in their career and how they might start, super gung-ho and excited to be in the career, and what the job could do to you along the ways, and things, signs to look out for of when they might not be coping very well.
Maybe just to say something a little bit like on that book and some other resources, like not to say it's inevitable that you're gonna just go down this dark road in the career. That's not what we're saying at all, but just to have the awareness of things to watch for. A good example Steph gave to me a while ago was like when we were early on in our career. I was probably about 3 years in, and they talk in that book about the chair, where I think it's called the magic chair, where after you're done your work week, you just want to do nothing and not make any decisions, and would just sit there and veg out and watch TV, or just absorb but not do anything. And Steph saw me doing that and pointed it out, and I recognized, okay, I am. And then we came up for a strategy for me to not do that anymore. And what we did was, as soon as I finished my last shift, I'd work a night shift at the time, when I woke up, I would start my day by going for a run, and then just kind of reset my week and disconnect it again, and then back into normal.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like that book gave you a fantastic opportunity to sort of share a common language so that you could recognize in each other, and you had a way to talk about it. In talking to some of the psychologists who work with first responders, one of them made an interesting suggestion to me, that rather than talking about the details of whatever incident with your spouse, it was more beneficial to talk about the emotional impact of that incident with your spouse. Would you have found that to be true in your experience?
I think it's a lot harder to do, actually. Like, that's asking a lot to.
Sometimes it's easy just to say what happened without talking about your emotions attached to it. But that's a really good strategy for opening up about how you're feeling. Because if you're doing that, if you're saying those things, just naturally, it's going to lead into talking about how it's impacting you, and how you're feeling as a result of these things you're experiencing.
Okay, good. So what are some of the things that family members should know about first responder culture as it relates to mental health?
I think a big thing that families should be aware of is just as much as we're trying to get past this, I think we've mentioned a couple of times already, it's just that stigma, and whether it's internalized or from outside, that first responders, police officers, firefighters, paramedics, they feel this need to be tough and to not talk about their emotions and their feelings. And when their support network recognizes that it's a challenge for them for a number of reasons, to be there and to start the conversation by talking about their feelings and opening up, it allows for that conversation. It's pretty hard to not have an in-depth conversation with somebody when they start by saying how they're feeling about something.
Okay, that's great. So Stephanie, will ask you, what are some of the significant stressors that law enforcement officers in particular face?
I think we've just been addressing it there, just that you're expected to be very stoic, non-emotional to what you're seeing and experiencing in the world. And
I think as well for police officers, there's maybe an additional layer of kind of public scrutiny and oversight that can add a lot of stress and anxiety. I know officers, and I've experienced it myself, where you've had oversight investigations which can impact you, like your career, your livelihood, and these investigations take years to resolve, and that's constantly hanging over your head if you're involved in a critical incident. So to have that additional layer of stress, it's not just dealing with the incident, now it's dealing with the impact of the review of the incident, which can take a very long time, and you need to have good coping strategies to manage what that feels like.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, because that's certainly something that's been pointed out to us as sort of a unique stressor for law enforcement officers, is that level of oversight and the length of time it can take for some of these things to be resolved, and the mental stress that you're put under during that process. So thank you for mentioning that. Stephanie, what do you think some of the challenges first responders face when trying to balance their professional versus their personal lives?
Just knowing when to try and shut it off and go over to the family side of it, and leave your work out of it if you can.
I think we've talked about some strategies for dealing with that. It's not easy, and like when we've talked about some of these ideas, they're little tips and tools, hopefully to help people, but it takes a whole approach of not letting it be your whole person. And I felt myself going down this road, especially like early on in my career, where you live, eat, breathe, drink, everything you do is to do with your job somehow, and just getting away from that and not allowing that to define you, because being a police officer does not define me. It does not define Stephanie. It's our job, and it's what we do, and we love our jobs. But being a dad, being a mom, being a partner, those are the things that define us. And just having that approach, I think, is really healthy to balance your work and life.
And so often working with first responders, we've heard that, being a first responder does define them. And it's so healthy to hear you say that's not what defines you. It's certainly an important component of who you are, but it's the other things like being a father and a husband that define you. So that's great to hear. So do you have any tips, Jordan, let's start with you, tips on how first responders can best support their family members?
I think some of the same approaches of being open and willing to talk about your feelings. I know, like for some friends of ours, for example, where one of the partners is a first responder and the other isn't, sometimes the partner who isn't a first responder feels hesitant to ask because they don't want to trigger something or upset their partner or whatever if they see some of these things. So front loading it and being open about, we had a tough call today. I can't really talk about the call, but it's made me feel a bit down. And just saying that, like that gives your partner an opportunity to then express how they're feeling about it. And when they recognize that you're not maybe coping as well, they can talk openly. But if you don't have that type of communication, if you're just kind of bottling it up, it's just going to fester and it's going to get worse. So hopefully if people are able to open up right at the beginning, then there's that two-way communication to help both sides.
Okay. Stephanie, just imagine for a moment that Jordan wasn't a first responder. How do you think you would be able to support his mental health? Because the mental health of spouses is often impacted in first responder families.
Well, even though like they're not necessarily seeing what they're seeing, our jobs are still going to affect their mental health. So it should be okay. Like we need to be understanding that we are going to affect or could affect them, and that they also have resources available to them, and that we should be open to maybe suggesting that they seek out those resources. And like George is saying, just being open to dialogue. And I think it's both ways. It's not just the first responder being vocal about what they're experiencing and feeling. It should be on the spouse as well to say, this is what I'm seeing in you, so that they might recognize it as well.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Jordan, what are your top 2 suggestions for family members in how to support a first responder?
Well, I'll be repeating myself a little bit here, but number 1 is communication. Like talking about how you're feeling, talking about the things you see with your partner. Like absolutely, that's number 1. And then just being there for them. I know, like for myself, especially when I first struggled with my mental health as a result of things that were happening at work, it took me quite some time to be able to open up about how I was feeling. So being patient, I think, is really important. And like Steph was really patient with me and allowed me the space and time to start to open up about how I was feeling, never bugging me about it, but always being there so that I had somebody to talk to when I was ready to.
That's excellent. Okay, so communication skills and being patient. Steph, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I mean, just about what Jordan was saying, it started out with him just saying, I'm having a hard time with this. Okay. And do you want to talk about that? No, not right now. So sometimes it took like more than one time period to for him to be able to voice how he was feeling. So it could be a lot of patience to wait for that, but just them knowing that you're there to listen and not walking away from it or brushing it off if they're not able to communicate that right away.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like not only being patient, but being consistent with your support. So continually offering that support in an open way and being willing to accept that maybe now isn't the time, but you can try again at another point in time.
Sorry, one other thing I haven't actually addressed is that when Jordan was going through those times, I actually made efforts to just continue with my life as normal. So if Jordan wasn't willing to come out to events and do our normal daily life activities, I would say, this is what I'm going to do today. I'm going to take the kids here and encourage Jordan to keep being invited to come out to these things, but also not pressuring him.
So it sounds like you were actually managing your own mental health to make sure that sort of his mental health didn't impact you and suck you in or bring you down as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good for you. Any final words?
I think maybe just the last thing I'll say is don't be afraid to say something and to ask for help. I know for me, like it was hard when I first needed to ask for help, but once I did, I was so glad I had, because I was able to get better. Just like if I had that broken leg and I go and ask for help, it can get it splinted and healed. I asked for help, and then I was able to be a happy dad and husband and police officer again. But the help won't just be there unless I was willing to ask for it, and I was, and I'm so glad that I did.
Thank you so much. It makes me think of the motto that we've come up with: share it, don't wear it, for a lot of the first responder materials. And it's just making that first step of sharing how you're feeling. And it's such a courageous step to take for many people, but how often we've heard that once they've made that first step, things get better for them. So thank you very much for your input today. Really appreciate talking to you. If you have any questions or comments, please send them to info@bcfirstrespondersmentalhealth.com. Good luck and enjoy your family night. Thank you.